So we're now officially into the full swing of the Picard era of Star Trek. We have the short trek called Children of Mars, and we have Picard Episode 1. And both of these have the same problem. They just love using Discovery-era ships. Children of Mars really went all out on this, showing us a look at the Utopia Planitia fleet yards as they appear in the Picard era, and they look suspiciously like the Discovery era. The ships are from Discovery, the dry dock is from Discovery, the shuttles are from Discovery, and even the little Work B utility craft are from Discovery. Now, it's super easy to explain why Discovery-era starships would be here. They could be pulling them out of mothballs for some emergency reason. That's easy to explain. But why not put these old ships into a modern context? Like with a new dry dock design, new shuttles and new work bees. But if for some reason they just can't use them, these things are incredibly easy to design and to produce as 3D assets. I personally made a dry dock, work bee, and a shuttle within a single 8-hour workday. And I did admittedly kind of rush these assets, obviously, but they really don't need to be incredibly high detail. In the case of the shuttles and the work bees, they're tiny little specks in the original scene. A 3D asset made in a few hours or 3D assets from the 90s would be plenty sufficient. Now, in my mockup, I used some random ships that I had laying around, and they're arguably a little unacceptable for cinematic visuals, but like I said, you can put the Discovery ships in here with absolutely no problem. My issue is that ironically, the corners that are being cut are the ones that are the easiest to solve. But anyway, Children of Mars is one thing. The Picard series is another, because Picard Episode 1 continues the tradition of using Discovery assets. They're still using the Discovery shuttle, and they use it everywhere. Granted, the Discovery shuttle does actually fit much better in the Picard era than it did in the Discovery era, but if we're to accept that Discovery is the new retconned look of the 2250s, how is it that this shuttle is still in widespread use? Sure, we can say that Star Trek hardware has a much longer lifespan than modern hardware, but we already know that this era has new ships. 20 years ago, they were using brand new varieties of shuttles, such as the Type 9 and the Type 11, but suddenly they've gone back universally to a 140-year-old design. It's not like we just see it functioning as a school bus or as a taxi. We see them everywhere, and most importantly, they're ubiquitous at official Starfleet facilities. Now, don't misunderstand my argument here. I'm not saying that there's absolutely no explanation for this. You can handwave a number of different explanations. Star Trek is really good at that sort of thing. For instance, we can imagine a nostalgia craze, and a brand new class of shuttle was designed to look identical to a classic shuttle. That works, but requiring us to rely on a contrived rationale to an extremely easily solved problem is, I hate to say it, but it sounds like laziness. The problem isn't that there's no explanation, but rather that we need to have the discussion at all. The creators have elected to use a historical design in the first place, rather than using existing designs that they already have access to. They could have used Type 9 shuttles from Voyager. It's not like they don't have a CGI model of it. And these shuttles are always small or obscured by motion blur, so even a low detail CGI model is more than acceptable, and retexturing it for production would take a lunch break? Was the issue that it was just too much of a hassle to convert it to a modern 3D format? Even if for some reason they can't use the canon designs, like contractually speaking, which is a bogus argument because we see canon ships in the episode, but even if they couldn't, or they lost all the CGI models for whatever reason, you could make a new one. It doesn't even have to be good, it just has to be different. I whipped this shuttle up in 2 hours, 55 minutes. It's not a great design, but in the context of the Picard show, it's infinitely better than the Discovery design. Not because it looks better, because it doesn't, but for the sole reason that it doesn't force us to come up with some goofy explanation to justify its existence. If instead of this, we got this, people might be saying, I don't really like that. But they definitely wouldn't be accusing CBS of being lazy or thinking we wouldn't notice or not caring about the canon of Star Trek. One of those options is obviously better than the other, so it's kind of confusing why they would opt to use the Discovery asset. This is easy stuff, and there was plenty of time to make new designs or to up-res old designs. I've been operating under the assumption that there was no time at all and the Discovery era assets were used in desperation, but really I don't think that was the case, especially because in the preview at the end of episode 1, we see a new shuttle, a brand new, never before seen in canon design. It's the McCall type shuttle that was designed by John Eves and featured in a Ships of the Line calendar. So obviously you have this design. You had time to model it and use it in VFX sequences, but we still have these mind-boggling examples elsewhere. I'm just really curious why this is the case, because it's not time or budget. And if you say that it just doesn't matter, I beg to differ. Star Trek isn't just some sci-fi thing. It's a world with hundreds of years of established lore. And being such, designing for Star Trek needs to be approached with a degree of historical consideration. And so far, I see this new era of Star Trek being strangely and inexplicably selective about how it approaches its own history. To summarize, I'm not saying that the Discovery designs are bad designs. In fact, I think the Discovery shuttle is pretty cool, and it works well as a Picard design. That's not the problem here. It's just that you can't have it both ways without creating unnecessary problems. Considering that these are problems that are super easy to fix, I'm just a little baffled why it was decided that the Discovery designs were considered perfectly acceptable. But those are just a few thoughts that I had and a few solutions that I'm offering. I'd like to hear what you think. I would love to hear from anybody on the inside of this production. I hope I didn't sound hostile or anything. I am just legitimately confused and very curious as to the mentality behind these decisions. So I would love to hear about that. But to the rest of you, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.